Hello and welcome to Other Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. I'm your host, Paul George. Economists, Wall Street, European allies, and even the Business Roundtable are all raising alarms about what appears to be a weakening U.S. economy and an increasingly damaging trade war with China. The Trump administration, in typical contradictory fashion, is at once denying that there is any cause for concern, while at the same time floating ideas for how to address the situation that they deny is happening. For this edition of Other Voices, we'll take a careful look at what's happening with the economy, Trump's trade wars, and the economic dangers that may lie ahead. And to help us take this careful look, I'm really glad to welcome back Dr. Jack Rasmus to Other Voices. Jack, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
You've been on several times before. Just to reintroduce Jack, though. Jack holds a PhD in political economy and is the author of numerous books and articles. Here are some of the books, and we'll talk about his new one near the end of the program. Jack is the host of the weekly radio show Alternative Visions on the Progressive Radio Network, and a journalist writing on economic, political, and labor issues for various magazines, including Z Magazine, Against the Current, In These Times, and a long list of others. And once again, really glad to have you back here. Let's start with the trade war, and I think we need to start with some definitions, or at least some reality. For example, Trump keeps telling everyone that Americans are not paying these tariffs, that China is paying these tariffs. True or false?
False, false. And
I suspected as much.
And increasingly so, because now the new tariffs that just hit in September are increasingly levied on consumer goods.
Consumer goods.
Before, most of them were business goods, but now
things like raw materials.
Raw materials and so forth. So eventually it hits consumers, but this is direct consumer good tariffs. I think a telling statistic is by Chase Bank Research, which said up to now it's been an impact on the average consumer of $600. In other words, taken out of their disposable income, the tariff hit.
That means we're paying $600 more for the same stuff that we've been buying.
But now it's going to $1,000 on average impact. And if you look at the U.S. economy, the only thing that's been holding it up is consumer spending, driven mostly by credit card debt and other debt.
Yeah.
But now it's going to be hit significantly. The other sectors, key sectors of the economy, like manufacturing, construction, and even business investment, are flat and declining. So these key sectors of the economy are slowly rolling over. Construction's been down for a year. Manufacturing is negative in many places, and business investment turned negative last quarter, and it's going to be even worse this quarter because now the trade war is hitting even harder.
Roll back a second. I'm going to have to keep asking you to catch up on some of these economic terms. When you say business investment has turned negative, what does that mean? How does investment turn negative? And I'm going to be asking you about negative interest rates, and it's going to start feeling like a chapter of the Twilight Zone. But what's a negative business investment?
Well, it means that investing in plant and equipment and inventories and structures, that's all defining business investment, is net negative because you have depreciation on all of that stuff.
Oh, I see. So when you add all the numbers up at the end,
depreciation is not as much as the new investment. And that's because of the trade war, largely, because it's creating great uncertainty for business, whether they're going to be even more uncompetitive going into the future. So if business is uncertain, that's the number one thing that puts a kibosh on investment. It's not the low cost of money interest rate or high interest rates. It's not even costs in general. It's the uncertainty about profits in the future. And that's a big factor now, and it's beginning to hit sector after sector, largely because of the trade war. Other factors as well, long-term slowdown in the global economy, et cetera. But it's clearly beginning to bite now, and you're getting a lot of business opposition beginning to arise, not only in the farm sector, but as you mentioned, Business Roundtable, Chamber of Commerce, all the big guns on the business side are saying, this isn't working, Donald. And it isn't, because we've been 18 months in this trade war.
Yeah.
And if you look at the trade deficit, in other words, the difference between exports and imports, after 18 months and all these tariffs and all this war all over the place, our trade deficit is still at the same level it was when it began, $50 to $60 billion a month. So there's been no positive effect on the trade deficit. But that's not really what the trade war is about, you see. People think it's about the deficit and the balance of trade and we're exporting more and so forth.
Because Trump does say that all the time.
He says it all the time.
In fact, that's one of the definitions I wanted to ask you about. When he talks about the trade deficit, that we have a certain trade deficit with China, meaning we're importing more goods than we're exporting.
Right.
What is the trade deficit with China?
Oh, it's $30-some billion a month, and in fact, it's risen in the last few months. It's gotten worse.
So Trump explains these as America is losing $30 billion a month to China. Is that right?
Well, when he
not
says
literally
losing, that means we're sending $30 million more dollars to China than they are sending dollars back to us. That's what that means, right? We're losing exports, imports, net, the difference between exports and imports. But the point is, it's getting worse, and nothing's really been improved after 18 months with the tariff wars, you see. Because this isn't really about tariffs or trade. The war with China is about technology, next generation technologies. I'm talking about 5G wireless, you hear about artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. These are the industries of the next decade. They are also the industries that will determine military dominance in the next decade. And that's why the hardliners on the U.S. trade team, the Lighthizer, Navarro, and others, up to now don't want a deal and have scuttled twice now any deal with China on trade because they want China to capitulate, not negotiate, capitulate on these next generation technology issues because the hardliners and neocons are aligned with the military industrial complex and the Pentagon, and they see this big challenge, a next generation military power over these next generation technologies. At the heart of this, that is always preventing a deal, is the hardliners don't like the concessions that China has made on technology. China has, as far as the trade deficit is concerned, already publicly committed to buy $1 trillion more over the next 5 years of farm goods. They've already committed and already begun to allow U.S. industry or companies to have a majority, 51% or more, ownership of their operations in China. And they've already given some banks that 51% or more. Those are two big issues that U.S. multinational corporations have wanted. Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, right, who is right there with Lighthizer, who is the neocon, right, Lighthizer and Peter Navarro. They're like twin chairs of the negotiating committee. In May 2018, came back from Beijing. This is when the whole trade war began in March 2018. Came back from Beijing and said, we got a deal, because the Chinese agreed to buy more farm goods and 51% ownership. But the deal blew up because the neocons got to Trump's ear. Bolton had just come on, got to Trump's ear, and they blew up the negotiations. And there was no progress and no negotiations over the summer of 2018. Trump tried to get the Chinese back to negotiations before the election, but they wouldn't be played because it was an election year.
Yeah.
They finally came back and made...
They know our politics.
They know our politics. They know him.
That's why they're targeting Trump's base with the farmers.
And they finally met with Trump after the November midterm elections in Buenos Aires at the G20 meeting. And at that time they agreed, Trump and President Xi of China, that, okay, now we will sit down and try to negotiate a deal. And they negotiated for the first 4 months of this year. Significant progress was made. And just before the China team came over to the U.S., the neocons scuttled the deal again. How did they scuttle it? Well, they simply told the Chinese, even before they came over, oh, by the way, if you come over in any deal, we're still going to keep our tariffs on you. We're not going to remove the tariffs. We're still going to go after your tech companies like Huawei and others. Right? We'll still proceed there. By the way, we don't like the fact that you are subsidizing your state-owned enterprises, which they've always done. And most
It's kind of their system.
yeah, right. And of course, we subsidize ours with tax cuts, right? So
Yeah.
all countries do that. And then, you know, the big one was they said, oh, by the way, if we have a deal on technology, you got to share your next generation technology with us. So the Chinese came over, and they came over, and there was no deal.
Yeah.
Well, that was the hardliners and Navarros and others throwing in at the last minute demands that they knew would scuttle the negotiations. And it broke down a second time this past May. Well, then Trump meets again at the end of June at another G20 meeting with President Xi of China in Osaka, Japan. And the two of them then agree again that the teams are going to sit down and that Trump won't raise any more tariffs and China won't do it either. In other words, like, we're going to cool it out. Right? Mm-hmm. So in August, late July, early August, the U.S. team goes over there and nothing happens. They come back and they tell Trump nothing happened, right? The Chinese aren't changing their position. We're not changing ours. Trump got upset, reportedly. This is in the business press. He listened to Bolton and Navarro and the hardliners again, and he immediately imposed more tariffs when he had promised Xi that he wouldn't do that.
And tanked the stock market.
And tanked the stock market, absolutely. Boom, the stock market crashed, you know. The bond market bubble blew up, and it looked like there was going to be even a deeper crisis, but Trump immediately backed off again, and so did the Chinese, and they're sort of backing off, playing it softer here, hoping to get together pretty soon in October. But I don't think there will ever be an agreement unless there's an agreement on this technology issues, which are really at the crux of this, it's because the other main issues have been resolved, the buying of more U.S. goods, the 51% ownership. The main issue on the table is technology, and that's at the bottom of this. Although with Bolton gone, maybe that's going to open up. We'll see.
Yeah, although Lighthizer and Navarro they're the neocon hardliners.
They're the neocons, still there, but we'll see whether the Mnuchin faction, which is the big bankers, Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, he's from Goldman Sachs. He's there representing the big bankers.
Yeah.
They got what they wanted, and they want to proceed forward. Hanging out there is this promise to buy $1 trillion more of farm goods, and the farm sector saying, hey, let's go, right?
Yeah.
But the Pentagon and the military said, no, we can't have a deal unless we have a deal over this technology issue. You see, the trade war with China began with the technology issue. In August of 2017, Lighthizer,'s office there, the U.S. Trade Representative, which is kind of like an ambassadorship, it's very high related, came out with a report, started issuing a report, which was really about, we're going to look at China's 3 areas of technology, because we think they're a threat there. They have this China 2025 program, and we're going to look into it. The 3 areas I mentioned: artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and 5G wireless. And then that report was issued and said, yeah, they're really violating, challenging us in these new technologies. That was issued in March 2018, and that was the beginning of the trade war.
It was kind of the founding document.
It's the founding document of this, and that's why I believe that technology is at the heart of the fight over next generation technology, because it's really a 2-country war over technology. It's China and the U.S. filing all the patents. 90% of the patents, and the Germans are, sort of back there, and the Japanese are a little bit further behind the other 10%, and no one else is in the game. This is the future of the next generation. It's a technology war behind the tariff and trade war.
All right. Well, just this morning on the day that we're taping this, which is September 11th, China made some small concessions. They had another round of tariffs scheduled to go into effect next month. And they announced this morning that some of those tariffs are not going to go into effect, although they are keeping tariffs on farm goods because they know where Trump is vulnerable. They know our politics. So they're going after the farmers that Trump loves so much, and vice versa, apparently. Was this a significant concession? I mean, what are they trying to signal here?
Well, what they're is not significant, but they are sending a signal that they're willing to negotiate if the U.S. is willing to negotiate. And I think it probably had something to do with the firing of Bolton, because they dislike Bolton intensely, as just about everyone else across the table with him dislikes him. And, you know, they probably read that maybe the hardliners are not so strong in the trade team, and now's the time to test the U.S. and see whether the U.S. and Trump want to, you know, come to some agreement. I think Trump, at some point, he has to come to some agreement on this. He can't go into the elections with the trade war still raging. So the question is, what will be all the terms of the deal when it comes, and how soon or later will it come? I believe it will come before the election. This may be a little too early, but the wild card in all this are the two economies that are weakening. You know, if it weakens, the U.S. weakens too much, and you get too much pushback from the Business Roundtable, Chamber of Commerce, the farm sector, right, he will settle probably earlier rather than later. But any settlement is going to have to be the U.S. backing off of this demand of capitulate on technology or no deal.
The reference to Bolton, they really did not like Bolton. They made some pretty blatant things. I just want to, from the statement today that China made when they were announcing what they're holding off on some of these tariffs, their statement said, "We hope that the U.S. can show sincerity and good faith, work together with China to create favorable conditions based on equality and mutual respect." Bolton certainly never showed them any respect, and I think that's one of the things they're talking about. But to get this mutual equality and mutual respect going, Trump immediately tweeted back that China suspends tariffs on some U.S. products, being hit very hard, supply chains breaking up as many companies move or look to move to other countries, much more expensive to China than originally thought. Who's getting hurt worse here? U.S. or China, or is it equal, or do we know what the pain is?
Well, you have to say who, not just the country, but who in the countries are getting hurt, right?
Very good point.
And I think you know, business is beginning to feel the pinch now, particularly retail, which is the soft sector of the U.S. economy, coming up for the most important part of the year, the holiday spending season. Right?
They managed to convince Trump to delay some of the consumer goods stuff, because the stuff that gets sold in December is being shipped right now.
Yeah. Well, we'll see probably by the end of October how much it's really hitting the U.S. if there's no agreement by then. I don't think there will be. As far as China is concerned, it's hard to see, hard to tell, because you know, we don't have a good look on what's going on internally, economically in China. But you know, they're probably suffering some losses in their manufacturing and their exports. You know, exports are contracting. We're in a global manufacturing recession right now, and that includes China and the U.S. now just entering it, and certainly other sectors of the world. So, you know, they've got to be hurting there. But China has, you know, a lot of reserves, and they can move pretty quickly. And if the trade war becomes an economic war, they can just let their currency devalue. And they don't even have to manipulate it. They're not manipulating their currency. You see, the rising value of the dollar is causing their currency to devalue. And if their currency devalues 10%, and it's devalued close to that now, well, that's equal to 10% of tariffs that the U.S. imposes on them. So you could offset the U.S. tariffs very easily if the Chinese wanted to by just letting their currency devalue. And that's a big weapon that they have. They haven't used it yet. But there's been a shot across the bow, you know, in our beginning of August when this big crisis hit and the markets collapsed. China didn't enter the markets to keep its currency up. It allowed it to devaluate, you know, 4 or 5%. And that sent a big message.
Yeah.
Big message that time to the markets, and the markets sent a message to Trump. And that's when Trump backed off and we see the consequences of it all. It's stabilized a little bit now. Business and the markets are waiting to see what happens next. And no one knows because they haven't had a meeting yet.
And again, as you were making the point that uncertainty is what's really causing the trouble in the business world.
That's right.
Because I think a lot of people don't understand what this uncertainty means, but these people are investing a lot of money over many, many, many years, and they need to have an assured path that they can actually
here's one way
achieve their gains.
Uncertainty actually takes a form, and that is, if I don't know what I can sell those goods for in the future, 6 months down the road, because the tariffs are going to raise the price, right? I can't really make a business plan as to how much I should invest and at what cost now. I may go ahead and do that, and then the tariffs may be 25, 30%, and I've committed all this resource to produce all this stuff, and I end up not being able to get a price to get a return on it. Yeah. I may end up losing money 6 months from now unless I have some way of knowing what the costs will be and therefore what the price should be.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a good explanation. What else do we need to know about the trade war before we move on to our lovely domestic economy?
Well,
any other thoughts on this?
Well, the other thought is all the other trade wars, quote, with everyone else are pretty much phony. If you look at what's been negotiated with South Korea and what's been negotiated with Mexico and Canada, it's just the tweaking of the existing trade deals. The big target has always been China. And until that's resolved, Trump isn't going to do anything of any significance with any other trading partner. Europe is a big trading partner, Japan is a big trading partner, but he hasn't done anything there, and he's not going to. He's not going to open up a second and third trade war front until this thing with China is resolved.
I imagine these other countries aren't real anxious to get into trade negotiations with Trump.
No, they're not either. No. Yeah.
All right. So let's I've got a long list of things that you've been writing here about the domestic economy, and they're all really interesting. I hope we can get to most of them. Let's start with unemployment, because Trump has been touting the jobs numbers every month, even though they're softening, and he's touting the low unemployment rates. And let's face it, the numbers that appear on the front page of the New York Times are substantially low. We remember the last 10 years of the Great Recession when they were astronomical. But you wrote recently about the real unemployment rate.
Right.
Let's talk about that a little bit. The announced unemployment rate is 3.8 or 3.9% right now. You say it's more like 10 to 12.
Right.
What's the difference?
Well, first of all, this number that you hear, this 3.7, 3.8, is a totally worthless number, right? That's only for full-time employed workers in the United States, 3.7. Even the Labor Department itself factors in other elements of unemployed other than full-time workers. In other words, involuntary part-time, those who are discouraged, meaning they haven't looked for a job in the last 4 weeks, those who are missing labor force, who haven't looked in a longer period of time, and they add those up, and even the Labor Department has an unemployment rate figure of 7.4, okay? But even that, I believe, is underestimated for a number of reasons. First of all, I don't think they are picking up all of the part-time temp workers out there. Mm-hmm. A recent bank rate survey indicated that 48% of the labor force, that's 163 million people, 48% of them are working second jobs.
48%?
48%. 45% of millennials are working second jobs, maybe third jobs too. Generation Xers, 38%, and even baby boomers, 28%. In other words, these are retirees who are going back to work part-time. We have a tremendous number of people who are working part-time out there, second, third jobs, And if they're working part-time, it's underemployed, and that means it's like a half unemployed, and it should be counted. See,
that's something that's never counted in these unemployment figures. They may say there are so many jobs out there, but most of them are crummy jobs that can't support a family.
Well, that's why so many people are working 2 and 3 jobs, because wages really aren't rising for most folks. We can talk about that next, if you will. But, you know, that's a huge number. And then you've got people who've gone on Social Security disability since the Great Recession, about 1 million or so additional people, because they were smart enough to know that unemployment didn't pay as much and it wasn't permanent. It would end after 6 months. Now, I'm not saying all those people were unjustly not on disability, but, you know, if they can, you know, game the system, good for them, right? So we have that number that should be considered. But the big factor is this labor force participation rate. In other words, since the year 2000, the labor force is 4.9, almost 5% smaller, 5%. Every year, right, people enter the labor force. Well, that number used to be like 67, and now it's down to like 63 and something, right? So if the labor force is 162 million and you're 5% less, it really should be 8 or 9 more million people in the labor force. Now, why is that important? Because the size of the labor force affects your unemployment rate calculation. So they're not counting, I think, the people who are in the underground economy. In other words, where they're working off the books, you know, they're not getting a paycheck paying the IRS.
That can include Uber and stuff like that.
No, well, they're not picking up all the Ubers that they should, because they only pick them up for primary job Ubers. They don't pick up secondary, third job Uber drivers. There's a lot of reasons in there. They're undercounting the labor force, therefore underestimating the unemployment rate. And another reason why this is wrong, an error on their part, is because if you go to another database, the Social Security payroll database, not the Bureau of Labor Statistics database, you find that there's like 5 million more people who are paying payroll taxes. Well, why do we have on that database 5, 6 million more people, and the official database that helps calculate unemployment, we have 5 or 6 million less? There's something wrong here. So I've been trying to dig out and trying to, you know, raise some questions about this. But the unemployment rate, for all these reasons, I think is somewhere around 10 to 12%, not the official 3.7%.
Well, let's talk about some more dueling statistics that you recently wrote about. And again, another aspect of the economy that Trump has been taking credit for and being given credit for, and that's wage gains. And a recent essay that you wrote, you know that the Labor Department put out statistics showing wage gains in the past year of about 3.1%. But the Commerce Department put out a similar report, but parsed the numbers differently, and they said the wage gain has been 0.9%.
Well, the difference is the Commerce Department is looking at the median family income, right? And it's only grown less than 1%, right? Whereas the Labor Department is looking at an average, not a median, an average, a mean, for the whole labor force.
For everybody.
For everybody, right? And they get 3.1%. Now, there's 3 things wrong with the 3.1%. First of all, it's not adjusted for inflation. If you take the official inflation of 1.6%, that means the real wage, what you can buy with, is 1.5. But even that is too high.
You're impressed with my math skills.
Even that is too high because, once again, that's for full-time employees. What about the 60 million who are part-time and temp and gig workers, right? They're not factored into that, right? Into that 3.1%. So it's an average, first of all. It's for full-time, second of all. And thirdly, it doesn't pick up, I mean, what's happening with the 60 million part-time gig workers and so forth? What kind of raises have they gotten? It's not in that number, in other words. right? So you got to dig behind what the media puts up there, you know, and they put up the most rosy statistic they can find. Why they should do that, I don't know. 3.7 unemployment, 3.1 wage gains. They're misleading the people as to what the real condition is. But when you look at McKinsey consultants, bank rate, pay scale, all of them show an increase in wages of about between 1% and a negative 1%, somewhere in between there, right? And that's really for the mass of workers what wages are really gaining. Now, if you are someone who is a software engineer in technology or a professional, or you are advanced degreed person and so forth, you're probably getting well above that 3.1, 1.5, which means the average, because those at the median or below are getting far less or none, the average comes out 3.1, 1.5. That's the third problem with that. It's not adjusted for inflation, it's full-time workers, and it's an average.
So in other words, this report kind of covers up the fact that those who are already doing well are doing better, and those in the middle and lower really have made no gains, and this big average that the Labor Department put out of a wage gain of 3% is almost all upper and loaded.
It's skewed to the top, I really believe.
So we're not doing much about our inequality problem around here.
No, we're getting worse because we're giving $1 trillion a year or more in stock buybacks and dividend payouts to shareholders.
All right. I want to try to get our audience in here, and I don't know if I arranged for anybody with the studio mic. Do we have one coming? It'll be coming in a second. So let me find one more question for you before we go there. I saw a stunning headline just a day or two ago that the Trump administration wants to restructure the housing market in the country. For them to be restructuring anything is scary to me. What is this about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the housing?
Well, it's really about taking this quasi-government corporations, two of them, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which are there to provide an insurance backdrop to mortgages. In other words, these are quasi-government agencies that sell stock to raise money, but they're not really pure corporations, private corporations. They're like quasi-government, you know, like the Federal Reserve or something. They have, in bad times like the Great Recession, had to absorb the losses from the mortgages because by law, any bank or mortgage company can sell their mortgages to Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae has to buy them. Okay? So in bad times, Fannie Mae has a big loss, and that's why they had to be bailed out in 2008-9, $200 billion by the government. But in good times, they're holding those mortgages, and of course the value and the interest they make, and they've been sending that profit over to the government every year. And the private sector is salivating and say, hey, we want that profit. And they want to sell off Fannie and Freddie to private investors who will then issue new stock, IPO, make a lot of money on the new issue. In other words, the investors, the hedge funds make big money, and then they'll make money. It's all a gimmick.
I see where this is going. When it turns sour 5 years from now, they'll hand it back to the taxpayer.
Hand it back,
All right, let's see if we have any questions in the audience, and just hold up your hand, and Julia will come around with the microphone, and we've left everybody in the political economy dust here. Okay, we've got one here, and if you would stand up and make it easy for our camera people to get you on. Hold that right up there.
Sure. Hi.
You won't hear a lot. That's to go on tape.
Thank you. So we've been talking about the mistakes and missteps of the Trump administration. And every time they make something, the stock market will crash, will drop fairly precipitously in a short amount of time. But what I've noticed is that a few days later, it comes right back up. And so my question to you is, what's driving that rebound? And is that something that you might consider as an overall indicator of the economic future? Or is this just some kind of pie-in-the-sky optimism on the part of investors who don't know better?
Good question.
Yeah,
Well,
on a couple of levels.
yeah. Well, I've been thinking about that very same topic, and I have my explanation of why that is so. First of all, the stock market no longer moves according to fundamentals. In other words, how profitable are companies, the old way that used to determine the movement of stocks, right? The stock market is mostly driven by these massive stock buybacks and dividend payouts occurring every year for the last 6 or 7 years. And last year it was $1.2 trillion corporations gave to their shareholders just in 1 year. Talk about income equality clauses, right? And this year it'll probably be higher because now the banks can buy back their stock according to the Federal Reserve. So you got this massive wall of money coming into the stock market. You add to that the fact that 85% of the trades are now done by institutionals, hedge funds, equity funds, corporations, and so forth. It's not you and me buying this stuff. The average investor has put all his money in what's called passive index funds that just follow the direction of the market. So it's this 85% who are sitting on a massive trillions of dollars of cash. And every time they have these algorithms that whenever the market goes down a certain percent, for whatever reason, the money flows back in and it doesn't correct, it goes back in and it goes back up. And whenever something is said by Trump or the trade war or something, the algorithm trading drives it back down, but then the money flows back in. People have no idea the trillions and trillions of dollars that are sitting out there now on balance sheets and investors' funds and everything. It's a massive, never achieved amount of money capital out there. It's just not going into investment that creates jobs and benefits the people at large. It benefits the wealthy investors who are getting wealthier and wealthier everywhere, not just in the U.S. It's a global new finance capital elite that's benefiting from this. And they've got this system set up, stocks and bonds and derivatives and everything. And they've got so much cash, they just keep it going. But it's basically, institutionals and algo trading. And whenever you have a dip, the money goes in and it goes up.
All right. Any other questions out in the audience there? Okay. I want to ask one thing real quick, also related to something that Trump recently said. Is the Federal Reserve Board constituted of boneheads?
Look, this has to do with the trade war. Here's the connection. Trump is trying to get the Federal Reserve, the central bank, to drive down interest rates. Because right now, interest rates are higher in the U.S. than anywhere in the world. In fact, in Europe and Japan, there's $17 trillion of negative interest rates. So investors in those places in the world, when they see the higher interest rates here, they send the wall of money that he talked about into the U.S. This is his second wall, the wall of money. And they send it into the U.S. That drives up the value
Mexico isn't paying for this wall either, are they?
No. It drives up the value of the U.S. dollar. And if that happens, it
hurts the trade war.
It offsets the trade war. The dollar going up or the Chinese currency going down negates his tariffs. So what he wants is for the Federal Reserve, the central bank, to lower the interest rate so there's not such a differential with the rest of the world, so that the money doesn't come in and drive up the dollar.
All right.
That's a little complicated, but all of this is connected. You see, it's a global economy, and all, whether it's monetary policy or trade policy. And this is what I talk about in my new book coming next month, The Scourge of Neoliberalism.
Yeah, subtitled U.S. Economic Policy from Reagan to Trump. There's a couple of scary bookmarks for you. When's that due out? October?
October, yeah.
Okay. And we'll be putting your website up on the screen, and people can catch that, but it's jackrasmus.com.
That's the blog, yeah.
Yeah, but you can find everything else.
You can find everything from there, right?
So we are going to do something different on Other Voices this month. We're actually going to have a second segment and a second topic So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you very much, Dr. Jack Rasmus, for joining us again.
My pleasure. Whether.
Good luck with the new book. You've got a couple here that are still available, so check the website.
Right.
Parting thoughts about the U.S. economy between now and the election. Is it going to be a benefit to Donald Trump in the re-election? 30 seconds.
Well, we are on the cusp, you know, as I said, of a recession. As I said, three key areas of the economy are flat or contracting. The only thing holding it up is consumption. What happens to consumption is the key, and to what extent trade whacks consumption is in turn the key.
Yeah.
And we'll see over the next several months how that actually turns out. I don't think Trump can win if he has a recession. If he does have a recession, you know, the odds of him winning, but if he can get through this one more year without a recession, you know, it's a 50-50 chance. I think that's the key factor, whether Trump gets reelected or not.
It really does seem to be the case, as Bill Clinton used to say in his campaign, it's the economy, stupid. People still vote their pocketbook issues, I think.
Americans have a habit of doing that.
Well, we'll have you back next year, and we'll talk about the economy at that point.
I'm sure.
Thank you again. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Thanks to Dr. Jack Rasmus.
So we need to stand together and support each other and to take action, because otherwise it might be too late. So let's not wait any longer. Let's do it now.
And we're back to Other Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. I'm your host, Paul George. And for this final segment, we're going to take a look at the upcoming global climate strikes inspired by a young activist overseas. And to talk about what's going to be going on here locally, I'm very happy to be joined by a young activist from around here, Julia Zeitlin. She's a student at Castellea Middle School and one of the founder of Sunrise Movement Palo Alto. Julia, welcome to Other Voices.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me start here. What made you become a climate activist?
Well, I've always been aware of climate change and bothered by it.
Always?
Well, since I was since I was in third grade, I knew about the greenhouse effect, but not until last spring, when I heard about Fridays for Future, was I really aware of the movement, the climate movement. And I was really inspired to take action in my local community. And so on March 15th, I organized a group of 100 people, and we protested that day in solidarity with the global youth strike. And
What did you do?
We marched to Congresswoman Anna Ishue's office.
Oh, good. Did you actually strike from school, or did you do this after school? And how was your school about it?
Well, I was really sad to hear that we didn't have school that day for another reason. But I think, so we protested, and I had a couple students from my school come, but it was mostly adults from Palo Alto.
Oh, good. And you marched over to Anna Ishue's office, and did you get a chance to go in and talk to her?
Yes, we were able to talk to her. We crammed into her conference room, and we had a good conversation.
I've been in that conference room. 100 people do not fit in there.
Throughout the door.
Yeah. And were you satisfied with her answers?
It was right after the Dianne Feinstein, that video of students coming into her office
Oh,
that
yeah.
went viral. And
Where
so
she was not very polite.
yes, she was very polite. She talked to us. She actually co-sponsored a carbon tax, and we were talking to her about that, supporting that, and pushing for more green mobilization. And she, so I think there was a question about the Green New Deal. She didn't, at that point, wasn't very supportive of it. She said it was, I'm not quoting her on this, but I think she said it was aspirational. And so there still is
in a
more.
way, but still.
Yes, definitely. But
Yeah.
I'm no, yeah.
She still is not signed on to the Green New Deal, is she? Or do
I'm
you
not
know?
sure currently,
Yeah,
but
I
at
don't
that
think-
point in time, I think she was unsure.
So what do you, coming up on September 20th, there will be a lot of actions locally on for the global climate strike. I'll talk about what Peninsula Peace and Justice Center will be doing, but what about Sunrise Movement Palo Alto? What do you have planned for September 20th?
Yes, so locally in my school, Castellia, we're going to have a walkout that morning, and we're going to march
Is
and
school
rally.
in session? You actually get to go out on strike this time?
Yes.
All right.
So that's good. And we're going to march around campus, and a lot of schools in Santa Clara County and all over the world are going to be striking school and leaving. And it's going to be, Bill McKibben says, possibly the largest day of climate demonstration in history.
What do you hope will be the reaction to this? And I think it's good to emphasize that it's global. And I hadn't heard what McKibben said, but I think it has all the signs of being that. What would you hope to see the next morning or the next week after all the work you're putting into this for September 20th?
Yes, I would hope to see more people engaged and more people seeing that that youth, adults, that everyone's rallying for this cause. And I hope that political leaders will see that their constituents really care about this, and that they will take the time to talk to them and to see what we have to say. And definitely regarding the protest that we had March 15th, there weren't very many students that came, and what I really want to do with my school, Castellia, is get more of them engaged. I think they're very smart students and they care about this issue, but we really need to show that our voices can be heard even though we can't vote.
Can't vote yet.
Yes.
So how many people are active with Sunrise Movement Palo Alto that you've been able to put together here?
Yes, so a couple of weeks ago, we had our first meeting. We got about 35 people, and it was really successful. A lot of people were engaged and excited, and we're having our next meeting on Monday.
Okay, and how are you going about trying to attract people and get them engaged in this?
Yes, so we have social media, which we're using to post about the Sunrise Movement and other climate actions that are happening in the future. And also we have some students from Stanford, and they're doing outreach and recruiting people from their school. And
Okay, and what I'm really interested in, you've had this awareness of global climate change since third grade. There's a lot of environmental groups out there, a lot of groups working on climate change. There's local groups here. There's Bill McKibben's group, 350, for example. What was it about Sunrise Movement that attracted you to that portion of the movement?
yeah, so I was really inspired by the actions that they did in Nancy Pelosi's office, the office takeovers, and I saw that they were really making a difference. That photo where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was talking to the protesters,
In Pelosi's office
Yes.
on the first day of Congress. Yeah.
Yeah, I was inspired by what they were doing, and they were getting a lot of attention. And so this summer I did some more research and they have online training courses, and that's when I
nice.
decided to start the hub.
Tell me a little bit more about the online training courses.
So
What did you learn?
So they're open to anybody. They're Zoom calls, and I learned the beginning of Sunrise and the foundation through the Sunrise 101 training course. And then we had a Western Regional Summit recently, where people all over the West Coast came to San Francisco and Berkeley, and we had different workshops talking about action planning and hub structure, and so I learned a lot there.
Well, so you went to that conference.
Yes.
Oh, cool. What workshop do you think you got the most out of?
I think a hub structure that really helped me think about how to organize teams within my hub so that there's not just 3 people doing everything, but that everyone's engaged and they have something to be a part of.
As a longtime organizer, I can tell you that's a real challenge. Constantly. I could always use some more training in that. And that's what you call it, hubs, right? And if you go to the Sunrise Movement website, which I think is just sunrisemovement.org, right?
Yes.
You can look up hubs, and the list is ever growing.
Yes, definitely.
Have you thought much beyond September 20th, what you hope to do locally with the Sunrise Movement, or are you kind of just focused on that one big action right now?
Well, on September 27th, we're working on promoting and publicizing a Naomi Klein event. She's going to be speaking in San Mateo, and we're going to be helping with that. And past that, in the upcoming strike, Sunrise is really focusing on, for the rest of this year, civil disobedience and mass non-cooperation. So they're planning more strikes. I believe the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and there are a lot that are coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty to do.
Yes.
Okay, and I do want to mention one other thing you're going to be doing next Friday, September 20th, is speaking at the rally in the evening. The Peninsula Peace and Justice Center is sponsoring. That's on Friday, September 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Palo Alto City Hall, the site of so many Peace and Justice Center demonstrations over the years. And I hope there's a big crowd there, and I hope people will join us there. We only have a few more minutes left, but I'm wondering if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Julia, or just encouragement to pass on. Do we still have the mic around? Oh, she left the mic behind. So, you did this one meeting with Anna Eshu where you kind of marched over there. Have you tried to set up anything more formal with her, like ask for an appointment and go in and express things? What do you hope to do with Congress as non-voters?
So with our hub, I think something we were talking about was creating a Green New Deal coalition. So gathering local businesses and organizations together in support of green solutions, such presented in the Green New Deal, and sort of making Palo Alto a really green city and an example for other cities around here, and maybe bringing this coalition and this to our local representatives.
All right. That sounds really good. Okay, so we've got if you could stand up if it's not too much of a problem.
No problem.
Good.
Yeah. Julia, I'm just really impressed with you, because I think at your age I really wasn't involved in social issues very much, not really until I got into college, but I didn't have models. I think if I had models that were my age, my peers, I would have gotten involved for sure. And I think that's one thing you're doing for your peers and for us too. We can encourage young people to get involved with the Sunrise Movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Was Greta Thunberg a particular inspiration to you, or was it more the Sunrise activists, or just a combination of all these things coming together? Or?
Definitely Greta Thunberg and Alexandria Villaseñor. Them striking, that really set off an idea for me. I was thinking about maybe writing something, or I didn't know how to put, where to put my emotions and how to actually create action, but they inspired me, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, good. Any other questions or encouragement from our audience here? Okay. Well, I want to I guess one thing I wanted to ask you, I take it you haven't met Greta yet.
No, I have not.
Do you hope to someday?
Yes, definitely.
So what are you going to talk about next Friday at the Peace and Justice Center's rally? Have you written your speech yet?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Well, about the climate crisis and the urgency of this issue, and that we, not just the youth, but everyone who we care about this issue, and that our voices can be heard, and we just need to put them out there and show that we care.
Okay, I am looking forward to hearing you. I'm going to be at that rally again. It's the September 20th Global Climate Strike March and Rally here in Palo Alto, 6 to 8 p.m. at Palo Alto City Hall. That's at 250 Hamilton Avenue. And our new executive director, Julia Zeitlin, will be kicking things off. Are you going to march first? I forget the order of things. So a short march through downtown, down University Avenue and back to Palo Alto City Hall for some speeches, including our wonderful guest here, Julia Zeitlin. And also, as of today, I'm really glad to be able to say that Chris Field, who was the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the United Nations, he chaired the science panel for the Paris Agreement. He's been a guest on this program a couple of times. We'll be speaking at that rally on September 20th, along with beloved local environmental activist Debbie Mytels. So get yourselves down there, 6 to 8 p.m. on September 20th at Palo Alto City Hall. Julia Zeitlin, thank you for being an activist, and keep it up, and we'll see you again in a couple of years, or
Thank
next
you.
year or something like that. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us here on Other Voices. The next program will be with Clay Carson about the Gandhi King Global Initiative, October 1st. See you then.